I love the colors on this rainbow hat and scarf set. Let me show you how easy it is to make these. I'm not sure if I've said this on my channel, but I love rainbow everything and anything. This hat is a bit different. I usually make a hat with a foldable brim, but as you can see, this is a shorter beanie. Super cute. This is the color, or actually this is the yarn that I used. It's the jumbo stripes made by Red Heart Super Saver. And the color is Favorite. And this is exactly a 10-ounce skein. And like I said before, on the hat, it is shorter. I would not suggest that you fold it, try to fold up the brim, but that is completely up to you. But let me go ahead and show you how long of a hat it is. It's just long enough for me that when I pull it down over my head, it covers my ears and it goes a bit of a ways down across my forehead. The hat measures 9 inches. And now let's take a look and see how long the scarf is. Let's start with the hat. Here is the yarn. I have wound it on my ball winder, and I'll leave a link to that. I love it because it has the easy center pull, which is very convenient when you're knitting on the knitting machine. Find your last hook needle, which is the white one on my machine, and then you want to go to the needle next to that and leave yourself about a 2 to 3 inch yarn tail. Secure your yarn underneath that first needle. Then with your yarn, go behind the second needle, then in front of the next, then behind, and then again in front, behind, in front, and that's the pattern that we're going to repeat. You're done casting on when you make it back to your last needle. Put your yarn behind that last needle, then put your yarn through the yarn feeder, and then make sure that you pick the tension selector that is appropriate for your yarn. Go ahead and zero out your counter. And once that's done, go ahead and start cranking your machine. A mistake that I made here, I had put the yarn through the middle tensioner, and as you can see at the beginning of the work, let me put it so you can see it. Look at how wonky, look at the bottom, those stitches, they're very uneven, the tension is off, they're very wonky. And so once I realized that, what I did was I changed the tension to the tightest selection, and look at the difference, a huge difference. For this beanie, you will need 90 rows, and then once you're done, leave a good bit of a tail, maybe at least a yard or at least a foot. Go ahead and cut your yarn, and then thread your use a yarn needle, thread the yarn needle, and then you're going to one by one take your stitches off of the machine. And the way that you do that is go ahead and take your yarn off to make sure to secure the yarn behind the last needle, and then crank your machine, or crank the machine forward just a bit so that you can start removing the stitches onto the needle. And you can either, for this yarn, I started out cranking a little at a time. As you can see, this is the side of the hat. This is the end of the hat with the tension, with the bad tension. Instead of making the hat over again, I decided just to go ahead and tuck that bad side inside and make it the inside of the hat. And guess what? Good as new. Onto the scarf, you want to use waste yarn. I'm using white because it contrasts well. And then cast on the exact way as you did with the hat. Once you complete 5 rows of your waste yarn, then you go ahead and add your yarn so that you can begin your scarf. Feed your machine, go through your tensioner, zero out your counter, and then begin stitching. I realized that my yarn tail was a little short, so I just pulled it out a bit to make sure I'd have enough to tie with the waste yarn. Roll your work up if it starts to drag the table, and depending on how long your scarf gets, you might have to do this more than once. And just turn your machine until you get to the last bit of your yarn. As you can see, this is what I had left, so I was to the end. Cut your yarn, remove it from the machine, and then go ahead and add your waste yarn. Make sure that your work is facing right side out. Pick an edge of your scarf. You're going to do the same for both edges. And what I'm doing is I'm making sure that my tail end is to the left, as it's facing me, that it's to the left. And I'm looking for a perpendicular stitch that's right next to the yarn tails. And so then you go down to the other end of the edge and you find the perpendicular stitch on that end, and you're going to use a crochet hook and begin, but you're going to be stitching into the outermost top stitches and the outermost bottom stitches. But it all begins with that perpendicular stitch. Go ahead and stick your hook underneath that stitch, and then you're going to go underneath the top stitch right next to that perpendicular stitch and pull the stitch through, leaving just one loop on your hook. Then do the same thing with the bottom stitch, pull it through, and that's going to leave just one loop on your hook. So each time that you go through one of the upper or lower stitches, you're going to have 2 stitches on your hook, but then pull that stitch through and you'll be left with 1 on your hook. And you're going to continue in this way until you get all the way to the other end. It can be a bit tricky when you get to the end. Oh, make sure you untie. I had forgotten to untie those 2 ends. But when you get to the end, it can be a bit tricky. So you can just kind of take your time and look and make sure that you get all of the stitches when you get to the end. And then take your yarn tail and pull it through, pull it all the way through the final stitch.